Welcome to the Heavy in the Games podcast. The NBA season has come to a conclusion as we turn our attention to the NFL. Former Cleveland Browns scout and ESPN NFL insider Matt Williamson joins us as he goes in depth about the NFL. The Heavy in the Games podcast starts right now.
Going up to LaBelle, touchdown. The fake screen, Sanchez over the middle, touchdown. Play action, Cutler wide open, Sanzenbacher.
Welcome, everyone, to Heavy in the Game Sports Radio. My name is Fred Perdue. I am your host, and we are back with NFL coverage. The NBA is done, and we have an NBA champion in the Miami Heat. So that means we can move on to college football and NFL football. And today, to help me talk a little NFL football as well as to go a little deeper into the NFL game, we have ESPN insider Matt Williamson. How you doing, Matt?
I am fantastic, bud. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I've been a fan of yours for a while now, and I just got to say, you're really becoming a regular on the show.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Definitely, and we're not gonna hold you too long, but before we get going, let all the fans know where they can reach you, as well as give a little background on yourself for the fans that aren't really too much familiar with you.
Yeah, you know what? I've been at ESPN.com now for the last 8 years. Loved every minute of it, and it's gone really, really well. The best job of my career, and that's saying a lot because I've been very fortunate. Before that, I was in the NFL as a scout for the Browns. Before that, I was director of football operations at the University of Akron, and then I spent 3 years before that kind of making my bones as a recruiting GA at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and I was here for Antonio Bryant's final season as a Pitt Panther and both of Larry Fitzgerald's years. So saw a lot of really good players and a lot of NFL talent that went through at that time. You know, helped recruit Darrelle Revis and LaShawn McCoy and some of those type of guys. So it was a really good situation for me. But like I said, I'm at ESPN.com now. If you go to the search bar on top and just type my name, you'll see everything I'm pumping out, podcasts, radio hits across the country, all kinds of articles every week. A lot of my stuff is insider, though. You have to pay for it, which is a compliment. I take that very much as a compliment. But the best way to get in touch with me or to really see what I'm doing, of course, is Twitter. And I'm real active on there, at Williamson NFL.
Definitely. And I used to really get on you on Twitter every now and then on certain tweets, and we kind of go back and forth. We text a lot, and kind of just to pull back the curtain a little bit. We're pretty cool off the air, and we talk a little every now and then.
Absolutely.
The NFL really is something that brings everyone together.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, and for now, this is the downtime, so to speak, but there's still a lot going on.
Well, it's not too down right now. And I actually had a bit of a spot earlier where we were speaking on the NFL and their off-season issues. 27 players since the Super Bowl, including Aaron Hernandez, a guy that really just found himself into a lot of trouble right now. And that is, and I heard the stat, it's 1% of active rosters. That's not too good for the Shield, is it?
It's not. And, I've been around a lot of these guys. For the most part, there's a lot of really, really good people in the NFL that are very fortunate to have great jobs, make a lot of money, they give back to the community, they're positive role models. But, I think that 1% or whatever screws it up for a lot of the other guys, and I think that's unfortunate. And I mean, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that in that age group across America, the percentage of young men getting in trouble is much higher than it is in the NFL. So I think in a way, it's a cross-section of our society, but there also is there are some athletes out there with a sense of entitlement that have always been, the biggest fish in the pond from high school all the way back, and think that they can get away with things that really they can't.
And the most recent, Joe Legree from the Indianapolis Colts with a gun charge a week after Aaron Hernandez, a guy that I'm just like, dude, what are you thinking? But you have issues like that, and these issues are going to be persistent until the NFL really cracks down on it. and I think they really need to bring the hammer down. Roger Goodell can bring the hammer down on every other issue in the NFL, but if anything, it has to be these gun charges.
Yeah, it's obviously a very difficult situation, but I mean, I'm not playing devil's advocate. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not condoning it in any way, but if you're a wealthy young man and you're out or wherever you are, people know you have money. They know that you're going to be a target. I can understand why people want to defend themselves, in terms of weapons and things like that, or defend their family. You get weird people coming to the house for autographs and, looking through your garbage and doing crazy things like that, they're not like everybody else. But unfortunately for them, and, they often make a lot of bad decisions too, but unfortunately for them, they're under a total microscope.
Definitely, and we're not here to talk about the bad. That's just part of the process that we go through here. A little bit of the news and notes there, but we want to talk about Matt Williamson and how and what does the NFL really do? And you are one of the perfect people to talk to, being a part of the NFL and being a scout for the Browns. Talk about how some of the management moves as well as personnel moves are actually done throughout the NFL.
Well, every front office is designed differently, and generally speaking, there is one big dog in the room in the building. Obviously in New England, that's Belichick, and he's not a GM. He's going to make the final decisions on things. So, you kind of have to look at it on a team-by-team basis, and we always don't know as outsiders. But, I mean, generally speaking, the way things work in a personnel department in the NFL is there's a general manager who makes more or less the final decisions on every roster move, every draft pick, every signing, and then he has two right-hand men. He's got a director of college scouting, which all they do is prepare for the draft, year-round. More or less, they are just looking at college kids. And under him will be area scouts, 6, 7 guys that comb the country. They each have a portion of the country that they're in charge of to get all the input possible on every college player. And then on the other side, there's a director of pro scouting. And pretty much that's what I do more or less for ESPN. We try to structure it in a similar way where, I am in charge to some degree of having insight on every player in the NFL, a pro scout, and that's really my forte. I mean, I've done plenty of college scouting as well, but that's more or less what I do. And then they have a handful of guys under them that are in charge of different divisions and what have you. So, for example, I was with the Browns, and I was in charge of the entire NFC West. And if somebody got cut from – we weren't a very good team, the Browns. We didn't win very many games. We were one of the worst rosters in the league, and we knew it, that if somebody were cut from the Rams, Cardinals, Niners, Seahawks, they would come knocking on my door and say, is he better than our backup left guard? And, let's make a move on him. Or, nah, he doesn't. He really doesn't belong, or he doesn't fit our scheme. So, it's a very fluid league. There's a lot happening at all times that you have to be on top. You have to have somebody in the building on top of every potential NFL player. And I also did some college stuff while I was with the Browns as well.
And if I remember correctly, you worked under Phil Savage?
Yes and no. I was actually let go by Phil Savage. I spent 1 year with the Browns. I was hired by Butch Davis and that crew. And then, again, we had a very poor season. By about week 10 or so, Butch Davis was let go, and we had an interim head coach. And then Phil Savage and company took the team over directly after the season, and I worked under those guys through the draft that we took Braylon Edwards. So much like many of the people on staff, we were all let go when our contract was up after that draft. I mean, scouts contracts pretty much go, from draft to draft, more or less. And I was there from right when they had selected Kellen Winslow. My first day was pretty much Kellen's first day, was that Monday right after the draft, until right after that we selected Braylon Edwards.
I had a chance to actually meet Phil Savage down at the Senior Bowl this past year, and very, very good guy. Got to say, he has things really rolling down there, and I'm really starting to wonder, is there going to be an NFL team calling his name a couple of years from now?
Well, frankly, they should. I mean, I know that he chose not to bring me back, and we only worked together for a month or two, but I learned an awful lot from him. He's a very impressive talent evaluator whenever he was hired as the Browns GM, he was the top dog in the building. Everything was under him. And in a lot of cases, those guys don't grind the tape so much. They're busy doing different things or have a different background. Well, Phil loved to be on the road and watching college kids and was really on top of that and very impressive. And I still certainly have good feelings towards him as well.
And as a personnel guy, a guy that really grinds out tape, we have a couple Twitter questions we can get out of the way early on. DeMarco Murray, running back for the Dallas Cowboys, we have a Twitter question. Is this his breakout year to really assert himself to be that guy in Dallas?
I've never been a big fan, to be honest with you. I think he has some similarities to Darren McFadden in terms of, pretty much is all or nothing with a very hard-charging, straight-line running style that isn't real elusive. I don't really like his lateral agility. He runs really hard, but he takes an awful lot of big hits from all angles. He worries me. In terms of, if I'm looking at him from a fantasy perspective, he would never be on my team. If I was looking at him from an NFL perspective, I would think, maybe we get 10 games a year out of him and he doesn't last real long in this league. But, he's a quality guy when the holes are there. And you look at Dallas, and I know they drafted a center in the first round, but I don't expect their offensive line to be all that much improved.
And we also have another Twitter question for rookie Denard Robinson, who has been labeled an offensive weapon. This is the first time I've heard this actual term. We always call athletes weapons on the field, but to actually be labeled an offensive weapon, where do you see Denard Robinson's career going?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, and I didn't take that as a positive thing, because if you remember, the Jaguars drafted him and then immediately called him a running back. And if they would have been, my interpretation was if he would have got the mini camps and the first times they really got their hands on him, if he would have been impressive as a third down specialty Darren Sproles type running back, they'd call him a running back still. And my hunch is he probably wasn't, which doesn't surprise me because I always thought he had a quarterback running style. And what I mean by that is it's a lot different to line up in the eye and take a handoff when everybody's focusing on you on a pure running play as opposed to being a quarterback that when the play breaks down, you take off and you're fast without a lot of people around you. Or, you keep the ball on design quarterback runs. It's not the same as running as a running back. And he's not built like a running back. He has no experience doing so. He showed very suspect hands at the Senior Bowl. I think although that's a little bit unfair because the poor guy's only been catching passes for a month or two at that point. So I thought, looking at him at Michigan and him coming out of school, I thought his best shot to be an impact player is as a slot guy. But as you know, slot guys are going to get a lot of passes, and if you're not sure-handed, you really got no chance. So I got to say he worries me.
Definitely, I had a chance to. I saw him live down in Mobile, and the hands. I'm still wondering, did he have gloves on or did he have bricks wrapped around his hands? Because
big frying pans on his hands.
Yeah, it was very bad. It was very bad. And granted, he really was put on the spot there. But you have to go in knowing that you were going to want to be changing positions, and from everything I'm hearing from a couple former players from Michigan, that he's been working at running back and wide receiver throughout the season with the wide receivers coach, and that's a red flag to me. But to go back to a guy that I really find interesting in the NFL is Russell Wilson, a guy that's 5'11". He had a very successful year, over 20 touchdowns this year, not that many picks, and his team really went deep into the playoffs. The question is, will he actually avoid the sophomore slump, or will it bite him in the butt?
I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I think he's a true star in the making. I was a huge fan of his a year ago. On draft day, I was hosting a live chat when his draft was going on, highly critical of teams not taking him earlier. And you can go back and find it on ESPN.com that every year during the preseason we have to make our predictions. And my rookie of the year for the 2012 season was Russell Wilson. And at that point, he wasn't even a starter in Seattle. I mean, that was still unsure. I liked him that much, which isn't to take anything away from RG3 or Luck or Richardson or any of the impressive rookies from last year at this point. I just like Wilson that much. And as much as I liked him, he exceeded my expectations. If you look at him last year, I thought Pete Carroll was very smart to just say, we're going to make you a total game manager. We have a great defense. We've got a fantastic power running game, and we're happy winning games 16-10. Just don't screw it up, Russell. You know, first month or two of the season, that was the approach they took, and they won a lot of games, and he didn't screw it up. But I think the more familiar they became with him, and you have to remember, unlike Luck or RG3, he didn't get nearly as many practice reps as a number one quarterback as those guys did. You know, I mean, they got drafted, and the Redskins and the Colts respectively said, hey, you're our starter, take it, go. You know, when Wilson got picked, they had just signed Matt Flynn, and he had to fight for the starting job and overtake a guy who was a veteran, which he finally did at the end of preseason. So they didn't know as much about him as the other rookie quarterback, coaches did. And as they did, he apparently and obviously digested what they handed him so well and so effectively that they just kept giving him more and more and more. And I'm not even talking about the read option, which, of course they did incorporate late in the season, and it's highly effective, but that's not going to make or break him as a quarterback. I mean, the ability to stand in the pocket, make great decisions, find passing lanes, use his feet to buy time, be highly cerebral, be a great leader, and with very few turnovers. That's what he was at Wisconsin. That's what I expect him to be with Seattle. And in terms of numbers and production, I think it's only going up. And now that they've surrounded him with Percy Harvin and, guys like Golden Tate are good football players, and Sidney Rice isn't a slouch, and Zach Miller came on. And, I think everything's in place for him to lead the best team in the league.
And you hit it on the head. Right now I'm working on a piece now for HeavyInTheGames.com. Please go visit that as well. My off-season winners and losers, and right now the Seattle Seahawks might just be number one, but you'll have to go check that out to see who I actually put out there to be number one. But you hit it on the head. Percy Harvin is really he was the deal breaker. If the Seahawks got him, including all the players that they got in the draft and put surrounding Russell Wilson with weapons, you really have to be excited for this team.
Oh, absolutely. And not to mention their defensive additions, guys like Michael Bennett and Averill and Antoine Winfield. Antoine Winfield's one of the best corners in the league still, and he's going to be their third guy. I mean, that's a ridiculous bounty of veterans to add to the mix. And you look at the power race going on in the NFC West, just at the receiver position, the Niners added Bolden and lost Crabtree, which I think is a major blow, and then Seattle added Harvin. So win in Seattle's corner in that one, although you can't blame anyone for the injuries. It's not like the Niners knew that was coming. Definitely,
and one of the things I saw from one of your ESPN guys, Casey Joyner, a stat that said that Antoine Winfield hasn't had a pass caught on him in the last. a touchdown scored on him in the last 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Casey does great work, and he would know better than I do. I mean, he breaks those things down every play and charts them. I mean, that certainly surprises me, but I don't think people realize how good a corner Winfield is. I mean, he's still, although at his advanced age, and everyone knows he's a tough, scrappy guy and a great tackler, very good near the line of scrimmage, but I think they overlook that he's more than just a cover two Rondé Barber type. He also blitzes really, really well. He's fine downfield. He hasn't really lost a step. He knows the game really well. That's a great addition for the Seahawks.
And that goes back to your days as a scout. What do you look for in an NFL corner? Because obviously the fans at home, they don't really get to see the perimeter with the camera angles that are out there as they are. You get to see more so the quarterback, the offensive line, the running back, the core positions, but you don't get to see the defensive backfield much. And when the ball's in the air, obviously you see it. What do you look for getting the all-22 tape? What do you look for in an NFL elite cornerback?
Well, in terms of college scouting, I think corner is one of the hardest positions to scout. And the reason is if Champ Bailey's out there or Patrick Peterson or whoever these top five type great corners are, teams just don't throw at them at the college level. So it's hard to get tape of, Patrick Peterson getting challenged, especially if you're not in a tremendous conference. If you happen to be a semi-small school guy, I mean, for example, the first job I ever had in football, I was an unpaid assistant at the university, at Duquesne University here in Pittsburgh. And if you remember Lee Bodden, I mean, he had a career in the NFL. Well, at Duquesne University, he was like the best guy that ever went through there. And we played 11 games with him as our starting corner, and maybe the opponent threw at him once a game. Why would you bother? He was the best player on the field in a very small pond. So in turn, he didn't get drafted, and he went on to have a 7 or 8 year career, very successful, and because nobody had tape on the guy. So there's not much you can do about that as a scout. I mean, you get your hands on him at pro day, at the combine, all that. That some of these lower school level corners are real finds for you, and that goes back to having really strong area scouts. I mentioned whenever we were talking about how front offices are broken down. Well, those guys that are in charge of the Northeast, or however that team breaks things up, they go into those schools year after year after year, and they have to have somebody, a coach, a secretary, a strength coach, a janitor, whoever, telling them this guy's for real. You have to have a trusted person or two in every college program out there, and then you report back home and say, hey, I got a guy that people don't know about. Nobody throws at him, but he's an elite talent, and certainly things like the Senior Bowl go a long way for those type of corners. But it also comes down to what prevalent coverages are you going to run. If you're the old school Bucks and you play a lot of Tampa 2, well, then you don't need to invest a ton at that position. You need a guy that's tough near the line of scrimmage, that is a banger and can be physical with receivers and reroute them, are going to be real active in the run game. They're going to be decent blitzers. But if they run a 4.59 or don't play particularly fast but have short area quickness, they work for your scheme. If you're the old school Raiders with Al Davis and you just want to put Lester Hayes and Mike Haynes on the outside, or Nnamdi in his prime, and say we're playing man all day long, you better know that this guy's a quality man coverage player. And again, you don't see a lot of that tape often in college either. There's a lot of zones, there's a lot of basic coverages that it's hard to find, both scouting receivers and corners, is how much press man coverage tape can I get my hands on to judge things from there? Because really that's the skill you want more than anything. I mean, if you can find press man corners, it makes everything else a little easier for you. So, that's one thing that they taught us with the Browns too. Was our secondary coach said, when you're watching any of the corners, and our receiver coach said it with receivers, is you need to watch every snap that you can possibly find of press man coverage. Can he get off the jam as a receiver, and how well does he do it as a corner? Even if we're not playing a lot of man coverage, you really need to. That's the most valuable tape, in my opinion.
And as far as the coaching changes go, we kind of got an idea of how the players are brought in and the hiring and firing process goes. As far as the coaches are concerned, you have a lot of the coaches that you don't know about. Who are some of the coaches that the organizations don't really let go of? A lot of those special young up and coming coaches that you may have also had experience with.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite fortunate that even though our Browns teams didn't win a lot of games, Chuck Pagano was our secondary coach, and Todd Bowles was his assistant at the time, and Rob Chudzinski was an up-and-coming young coach. He was a tight ends coach for us, which, when you look at the offensive side of the ball, is, kind of the lowest rung on the ladder. He's usually the young guy, but at the time he was, a bright young tight end coach, and now he's the head coach of the Browns, 10, 11 years later or whatever it is. And I do think every team sort of has that, that I'm here in Pittsburgh, and things don't change here. I mean, I just turned 40 years old a couple weeks ago, and in my lifetime, we've had 3 head coaches in town, and more so than even that, if you look at the defensive side of the ball, Dick LeBeau's been here for so long, but there's also a linebackers coach named Keith Butler who's kind of waiting in the wings, and so things don't change all that much. And I think that's a good thing, a good nugget that you brought up, because I think the good organizations, much like they do with players, need to cultivate talents at coaching positions as well.
And I really look at a lot of the defensive coaches, and you mentioned Todd Bowles, a guy that I really liked. Didn't really get the opportunity I thought he deserved in Miami, but hey, that's the NFL. The NFL is a revolving door of hirings and firing, signings and cuts, and we can go into a little bit of the signings and cuts as well. What goes into the process of a player being signed, worked out, signed, and ultimately cut?
You mean a veteran like in free agency, or in what stage of the process?
Well, a veteran coming in to a team after being in the league a couple of years, and a team coming in free agency and says, hey, we want to sign you, we want to work you out, especially after an injury or something similar to that.
Well, again, that's really difficult for every guy. I mean, it's much like I said, how how scouts have to have a rapport with people in every college program. That the big time decision makers in a pro side of the front office, of the NFL scouting side of the front office, have to have agents they trust. I mean, there's a lot of budding agents out there. Some of them are great people. I mean, some of them are scumballs. Some of you get just like in any walk of life, you get a little bit of everything. But you'll notice, and it goes kind of behind the scenes, that some teams do more business with certain agents because there's a trust factor there. If this agent assures you that this guy's knee is fine, and he shows up and you sign him because you're in such a hurry to beat the Cardinals and the Raiders to get him in town, and his knee's shot, you're not going to deal with that guy again. So there is reputation at stake. Every medical staff is a little bit different, so that's really an interesting phase of it too. Is some of these guys that get injured hang out there for a long time and really didn't need to be, but it only takes one medical staff to say, yeah, he's okay, and some are more lenient than others, and it's not a black and white situation in terms of medical, and I think that's it's frustrating for me, but it's also enlightening for me too, because whenever I'm on the radio or asked to scout a player, the one thing that I try to avoid is talking injuries, because I know that I don't know, and the same is true for Belichick and all the great personnel evaluators out there. They don't know more about injuries than a team doctor who went to med school and did this for a living, and that's their specialty. So as much as you love a player, if they tell you, hey, Rob Gronkowski's got a bad back and he may not last in this league very long, you got to take that, you have to trust that. I mean, that's a reason these guys are on your staff, and they're extremely, extremely important.
Is Darrelle Revis a guy after having a knee injury that on tape you still say, man, I could have him, I can use him, and put him in a situation to win?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I told you I helped to recruit Darrelle to Pitt. Big fan of him as a person and all those things as well. Just watching him, unbiasedly on tape and all that, clearly he's been the best corner of our generation, and he's incredibly gifted. But his best asset is his toughness and his film study and his knowledge of the position. And none of those things are going away, even if he returns 90% of what he once was. Maybe he won't be the best corner in the league, but assuming that he still has, very good movement skills, he's so fundamentally sound and studies his opponents so well that I have a real hard time believing that he's going to drop off from, at a minimum, a Pro Bowl caliber player.
And we have another question from Twitter. Talk about some of the personnel packages, and we were going to get into this, so this is a great question to get into it as the NFL is becoming more of a passing league now. So talk about how some of the personnel packages work. A lot of the fans are really, really wondering how do the NFL coaches go about selecting players for personnel packages?
And it's a very broad question, and it's becoming very, very specialized at a very rapid rate, in my opinion, both on defense and offense. That you now have, I think we're going to start hearing terms like nickel linebacker a lot more. Where growing up, I mean, there wasn't even such a thing as a nickelback hardly. That you look at a third corner now, and he plays. If you're in a standard 3-4, for example, your nose tackle is on the sidelines an awful lot. It used to be that if you had a solid 3-4 team, you had to have Casey Hampton, Vince Wilfork, a stud 3-4 nose tackle. Now, if you have that guy, the team that you're playing against can just go 3 wide, and your stud nose tackle stands on the sideline holding his helmet, and you bring in a third corner, or a nickel linebackers get shuffled in and out. So more than anything. And it's a fun era because it is changing so rapidly, but it's all going towards the pass. These linebackers that can run with the modern tight ends, the Jimmy Grahams, are going to become more and more in service. And the big guys that are between the tackles that only stuff the run, that are 265 pounds, are becoming like a fullback and becoming like a dinosaur. That if you can't play the pass at any position, you're starting to get phased out. We're seeing a lot more 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight end as standard team personnel. And it goes back to the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots were the first, but they were the most effective in doing so. And everyone wants to talk about Aaron Hernandez, and I don't care so much about the off-the-field stuff, but in terms of on the field, these hybrid players that you can't label are really, really important nowadays. And what I mean by that is whenever, a standard defense looks at 12 personnel, that means they're probably going to play their base defense against that team, more often than not. But if you go against 11 personnel with 1 back, 1 tight end, and 3 receivers, you're probably going to go to nickel or dime. Well, Aaron Hernandez doesn't really have a label. He's half tight end, half receiver. So whatever you choose, whenever it's a running back, Gronk, Hernandez, and 2 tight ends on the field for the Patriots, whatever you choose, you're wrong, because the quarterback is so wise, Brady, that he's going to look at things and say, okay, you're going to play your base against our 12 personnel, against that personnel grouping. So therefore, I'm going to treat Aaron Hernandez like he's a wide receiver, and we're going to operate things like we're running 3 wide all day. And that means a linebacker's covering Gronk or Hernandez in some way, shape, or form, which is not good. And, of course, Brady now takes it to a new step and says, we're going to go hurry up in such a fast pace that you can't switch your personnel, and I'm just going to attack the same guys over and over and over. And if you look at it and say, well, we're going to treat Hernandez like a receiver, and we're going to play nickel on base downs, 1st and 10 against that same personnel grouping, well, then Brady looks at it and says, well, I got a power back in the back here in Ridley. I got a really good offensive line. It's a great group of run blockers. Gronk's going to blow people off the ball. I'm going to treat Hernandez like a tight end, and I'm going to run power against, a lighter defensive front. So I think if we're seeing that more than ever, that you see guys, and there's some linebackers that way, that how do you count this guy? Is he a big safety or is he a linebacker? Or is he a tight end or a wide receiver? Reggie Bush is sort of that type of player where the Saints used him really that way. If you count him as a running back, or if you count him as a wideout, that he can go out and run wide receiver routes. Marshall Faulk was a great example of that there's no right answer. And I think that's the direction that the NFL wants to go on both sides of the ball.
And the one guy you left out, and I'm really surprised that you left him out on defense, is Troy Polamalu, a guy that's all over the field. You can't really can't label him at all. And granted, at times he is a liability on the field. But does he really truly have an assignment at this point?
More often than not, yes. But I think he's also got more freedom than maybe any defensive player in the NFL to do what you want, Troy. If you see something, don't hold back. He's obviously his movement skills are off the charts, and his flexibility and his versatility are off the charts. But so is his mind and anticipation for the game. So, that's, like I said, I'm based here out of Pittsburgh. I'm on the radio in Pittsburgh all the time, and I always come back to it. I was like, well, this defense will be fine if 43 is healthy. If not, it's going to be a grind every week.
And before we let you go, we can't let you go without this last Twitter question. It's really more of a personal question from myself. We recently had the top 100 players in the NFL released, and the top 10 players were released. I got to ask you, Matt, who are your top 10 players in the NFL right now and why?
Fred, I didn't do my homework. I apologize. You sent me an email. You're going to ask me this question, and I've had sick, barfing kids the last couple of days, and I've been slacking them just a little bit. But the obvious names that come to mind, just, without a list in front of me, I will go to my grave saying Aaron Rodgers is the best player in the NFL. I have no doubts in my mind about that whatsoever. I know Adrian Peterson is in that top 10. I don't think there's an offensive lineman in that group, and you can actually find it. It's going to be a little dated now, but once a year, ESPN.com has me do my top 50 too, much like the NFL Network did theirs, that I do my top 50. So there is a reasonably fresh one out there. I think I did it right after the season, or it maybe even been like week 12 or so last year, so it's still pretty relevant. But Rodgers would certainly be one. Peterson's in that is in the top 10 for sure. Calvin Johnson's definitely in that conversation. I remember when I did it last, I had Jimmy Graham 11 or 12. I had Gronkowski certainly in the top 10. You maybe would drop him a little now just because, there's so many other great players, and is he going to be on the field? There wasn't an offensive lineman in my top group. There's certainly some other quarterbacks, too. I mean, I still think Brady, Manning, those guys are still deserved. Breeze is certainly in that conversation still. Defensively, Revis would definitely still be in there. I have little doubt that he's still going to be great. I think right now J.J. Watt is the best defensive player in the league, and part of that's because of Darrell's injury. And I think Von Miller for sure would be on that list.
Very good, impressive list of players. Aaron Rodgers is clearly my number one. It's some of the things that he can
He's an all-time great.
Some of the things he can do with the football and with an offensive line that isn't that great. No real running game. I'm hard-pressed to find. I love Peyton Manning. He's an instant Hall of Famer. He's been that way forever. Tom Brady the same way. But Aaron Rodgers, he does so much more with less up front than any other quarterback in the NFL.
And there's no question about it. And I encourage fans just to pull up, his player page or his all-time stats. And the thing that's never talked about the guy, everyone knows what he does so well, but the thing that's never talked about the guy is he doesn't throw any interceptions. His interception rate is ridiculously good, and he's one of the best quarterbacks. He's one of the only quarterbacks in the league that is equally as good under pressure or not. I mean, he really does not have a weekness.
And if you have time for one last question,
let's do one more, sure.
The read option. This is a really an issue that really has sparked a lot of interest throughout the NFL. You have the read option being run all over now with Robert Griffin III, Russell Wilson, even Andrew Luck, who, by the way, is my favorite quarterback in the NFL as far as rookies this past year. I've been watching him since high school. He's even been running it a little bit. These quarterbacks are getting a lot more athletic, as well as Colin Kaepernick. Where do you see this read option going? Will it go the way of the Wildcat, or will it stay around a while?
I don't think it goes the way of the Wildcat. The Wildcat was too easy to defend and the true Wildcat is a non-quarterback taking a snap behind center. Ronnie Brown. So I just think that was too easy to defend. It caught people off guard for a while. But in the end, if a non-quarterback's going to take snaps behind center, I'm fine with that as a defensive coordinator, and I'm just going to make sure he throws the ball. Do everything you possibly can, play cover zero and attack him and say, okay, Ronnie, if you can beat us throwing the ball, great, give it a shot. The read option I don't think is going to go away. I think it's going to be much more difficult to defend. But, and this is a big but, I don't think it can be a foundation of anyone's offense. I think that what we saw last year was a little bit fluky, and here's why. If you look in 2011, just 2 seasons ago, there was 2 teams running any version of read option. This is before Wilson came to the league or Kaepernick was a starter or RG3 was even around. So Tebow with Denver and Cam Newton as a rookie with Carolina were the only teams that you really saw consistent read option. So during the off season just 1 year ago before the 2012 season, I don't think many defensive coordinators were spending their hours this time of the year figuring out ways to defend it, because at this point Tebow is now a Jet, and I don't think we're going to see much read option unless we're playing Carolina twice a year. So I don't think a lot of off-season attention was dedicated to it. Well, what do you think's happening now? 32 defensive coordinators are grinding their mind and calling every college coach they know for tips on how to stop the read option. So I think it'll be not phased out, but I think it'll become a peripheral part of an offense. And
there's one college coach that I don't think any NFL, the other 31 other coaches will not be calling, and that's Chip Kelly of the Philadelphia Eagles, who many don't know what he'll run. But that'll be a topic for another show, Matt. It was great having you on. Definitely thank you for coming on. I know you have a busy schedule, but before I let you go, please plug your stuff. Let everyone know where they can reach you again, and definitely got to have you back on again. Yeah, I'd love to come back on. It was a lot of fun, Fred. Thank you. Again, I'm very active on Twitter, at Williamson NFL, and I got a lot of followers there, and I interact with them quite a bit, post everything I do there. And obviously on ESPN.com. I'm an NFL scout for ESPN.com, and they keep me very busy doing all sorts of different things every day. So I'm not hard to find. All right, Matt, thanks for coming on. All right, man, take care of yourself. All right, folks, that was Matt Williamson, ESPN insider and scout for ESPN.com. Great interview. great interview. I encourage you to go back into the archives and check that out. If you didn't hear the total show, you can also check it out on iTunes as well as on the site blogtalkradio.com/heavyinthegames. You can hit us up on Twitter at heavyinthegames, HEAVYINTHEGAMES. Hit me up on Twitter at FPerdueSports, as well as stay tuned to the site, heavyinthegames.com. We have a lot of great things going on. I mentioned it, and I will have to mention it again. I got my Phil Steele magazine, so I have to say, shouts out to Phil Steele. Every year when you get that magazine, you know it's football season. College football's coming. The NFL season's coming. This is just something that we plan on doing all the time. So check back in. We'll be doing shows like this all the time. The NBA coverage is still going on. We have free agency. Where's Dwight Howard going? Where's Josh Smith going? Where's Monte Ellis going? And more. You got to hit up heavyinthegames.com for all of the latest information in the NBA, the NFL, college football, college basketball. The MLB All-Star Game's coming up. Yasiel Puig's doing a lot of great things. The question is he going to be there? Why isn't he there? You can do all kinds of things there. Visit heavyinthegames.com. For me, I'm Fred Perdue. I'm your host. I am out.